She never thought a stranger could change everything in a single heartbeat. One moment she was trembling, eyes wide, breath shallow, surrounded by judgment. Then, a black man she'd never met stepped forward, whispered 2 words that silenced the crowd, and gently kissed her shaking hand. Her ex watched from a distance, frozen. What he saw shattered the lie she'd been living, and what happened next would expose more than just a broken relationship. It would reveal the truth about who she really was. Before we dive deeper, take a moment. If this story hits home or makes you pause, hit the like button and drop your thoughts in the comments. Sharing this story could open someone else's eyes, too. It had been months since Natasha left her small-town life behind, months of pretending she was fine, of smiling through the whispers that followed her everywhere. She'd moved to the city to start fresh, working long shifts at a bookstore, telling herself the past was buried. Her ex, Derek, was the last piece of that old life she swore she'd never see again. But fate has a cruel way of testing what we hide. That afternoon, under the soft hum of street vendors and chatter, she spotted him, standing across the plaza. His stare froze her in place. And beside her, a stranger noticed the fear in her eyes before she could even speak. The air around Natasha grew colder the moment Derek started walking toward her. His confident stride carried the same arrogance she remembered too well, the same smirk that once made her feel small. People in the plaza barely noticed, but to her, every step felt like thunder. She wanted to move, to disappear, but her feet wouldn't obey. That's when the man beside her, the stranger, spoke softly. "Are you okay?" His voice was calm and steady. But when Derek's eyes flicked to him, everything changed. It was subtle at first, the shift in the crowd's energy. Derek's tone sharpened, dripping with the kind of venom that hides behind a smile. "Didn't expect to see you here, Tasha," he said loudly enough for nearby faces to turn. "Making new friends, huh?" His gaze landed on the stranger, a black man with a worn jacket and kind eyes. "Interesting choice?" The words cut through the air, thinly veiled but heavy with meaning. Natasha felt her chest tighten. She'd heard that tone before, back home, at family dinners, in whispers disguised as jokes. But here, in the open, it sounded uglier and louder. The stranger didn't react. He just stood still, his posture calm, eyes locked on Derek's. Natasha tried to speak, but her throat burned. The plaza seemed to hush around them, the noise fading into a strange silence. Quick pause. If you haven't yet, keep watching till the end, because what happens next completely flips the story, and you won't want to miss it. Then Derek stepped closer. "You know him?" he asked, mock curiosity curling his lips. Natasha shook her head instinctively, panic taking over honesty. And that was the moment something broke in her. The stranger's expression changed, not in anger but in disappointment, a quiet kind that said more than words ever could. He didn't leave, though. He stayed. A group nearby began whispering, glancing between them. Natasha could feel the weight of their judgment pressing on her back. Someone muttered something under their breath, something cruel. The stranger heard it. His jaw tightened, but he stayed composed. That calmness unsettled Derek, who stepped even closer, blocking Natasha's path. "Don't tell me you're scared of me now," he said, smirking, but she was scared, not just of him, but of herself. Of what silence made her complicit in. The stranger finally moved, not aggressively, but with quiet courage. He stepped between them, his voice low yet firm. She said nothing. "Maybe that's your cue to walk away." Derek laughed, but it came out forced. "Who do you think you are?" The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Natasha, his eyes steady. For a moment, the world felt frozen. The city sounds, the murmurs, even her heartbeat. And then he did something no one expected. He took her trembling hand, held it gently, and whispered, "You're safe." The plaza gasped. Derek's face drained of color. Natasha's eyes filled with tears, but not of fear anymore. It was something else, something that had been waiting to surface. The stranger's calm defiance had drawn a line no one else dared to. And as Derek's anger flared, Natasha realized this wasn't about one confrontation. It was about every silent moment she'd let injustice pass, unchallenged. And now, the world was watching. Derek's laughter echoed across the plaza, but no one joined in. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Natasha's hand still trembled in the stranger's grasp, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a second, she thought he might back down, that he'd just walk away like she always had. But he didn't. He stood tall, silent, composed, and unafraid. "Take your hands off her," Derek snapped, stepping closer, his face red with fury. The stranger didn't move. His eyes never left Natasha's. "Are you going to let him touch you like that?" Derek barked, his voice breaking through the silence. People had started filming now, phones raised, eyes wide. The crowd had turned into witnesses, and then it happened. Derek shoved the stranger. Hard. Natasha screamed. The man stumbled but didn't strike back. Instead, he straightened slowly, brushing off his jacket, his calmness cutting deeper than any retaliation. "That's enough," he said softly, but his voice carried. "Not today." Security guards from a nearby store began running toward them. Derek tried to speak, to twist the story, but cameras were already rolling. The truth was being recorded in real time. Natasha looked at Derek, really looked, and saw the man who'd once told her to stay in her place when she'd defended someone who didn't look like her. All the silence she'd swallowed over the years began to rise inside her like fire. "Stop," she said, her voice shaking, but loud enough to cut through the noise. Derek froze. "You don't get to do this anymore," the crowd murmured, unsure what would happen next. The stranger looked at her. No judgment, no pity, just quiet understanding. Then, in a gesture that silenced everything, he gently lifted her trembling hand and pressed his lips to it. The world seemed to exhale. Derek stood there speechless, realizing he had lost something he could never control again. Natasha's tears fell, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from release. The cameras captured every second, and in that stillness, under the weight of 100 watching eyes, she finally stopped pretending, because the truth was no longer a secret. It was alive, right there for everyone to see. The plaza eventually emptied, but the silence it left behind said more than any words could. Derek disappeared into the crowd, angry, humiliated, and powerless for the first time. The stranger didn't stay for thanks. He simply nodded at Natasha, his expression calm, almost peaceful, as if standing up for her was nothing extraordinary. Then he walked away, blending into the rhythm of the city, leaving behind a moment that would live in her mind forever. For the first time in years, Natasha didn't feel afraid of being seen. She felt the weight of what she'd ignored, every time she'd stayed quiet when a cruel joke was made, every time she'd convinced herself that silence was safer than confrontation. That day, she learned that safety doesn't come from staying silent. It comes from standing on the right side of truth. No matter who's watching, if this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this are meant to be seen, felt, and remembered. The video of that moment spread quickly, shared, debated, dissected. Some called the stranger a hero. Others tried to twist the story. But no one could deny what the world saw with its own eyes. A man who met hate with grace and a woman who finally stopped hiding behind fear. Natasha never saw him again. But every time she walked past that plaza, she remembered the warmth in his voice, those two simple words that changed everything. "You're safe." They weren't just meant for her. They were meant for anyone who's ever been afraid to speak up. Anyone who's ever watched injustice unfold and wondered if their voice mattered. And maybe that's what this story really is. Not about one confrontation, or one man's courage, but about the small moments that force us to choose who we are when no one else will. Because silence protects comfort. But truth protects lives. So the question remains, when the moment comes to stand up, to speak out, to say enough, will you? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. More stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one.